Should we get started? It's 9:05.
Sounds great. You want to, I assume you did the highlights.
Yes.
All right, take it away.
Sure. Cool. Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining. Let's go through some of the highlights. Um, so starting from Java, we have for Flink, we have clear global statistics state in it to avoid duplication. Thanks, Guo Yu. Also for Flink, move right from appender factory to file writer factory, thanks to Peter. I know there's a lot of refactors around. For spec, we have clarified restriction for geometry type in V3, thanks Zuhan. And for Hive, we have fixed the trailing slash issue for the database path in Hive Metastore, thanks to Rajiv. Spark 4, add variant round trip test for Spark, thanks to Huaxin. For core, we have fixed the respecting custom fix for respecting custom location provider in serializable table. I know this has been a bug. Thanks for Presmed. I can't say that, but thank you regardless. For API and core, fixed byte buffer conversion for variant and bounds, thanks to Amog. We have some encryption, integration, and tests, thanks to Gershinsky. Flink, we have supporting DV in Iceberg Sync, thanks to Guo Yu. For core, we have return 304 from reference IRC, thanks to Gabor. Spark 4, add schema conversion support for default values, thanks to Drew. API, add exception definition for scan planning, thanks to Amog. For core, prevent dropping namespace when it contains a view, thanks to Edward. Core, check table UUID for REST table operation, thanks to Yuya. And also for core, fix overflow due to default value on timestamp nanos, thanks to Yuya. Does anyone else want to do PyIceberg, or should I just keep going? Okay, I'll keep going. From PyIceberg, we remove Python 3.9 support, thanks to Aniket. Row lineage field for V3 support, added by Alex, thank you. Fix nightly Pipey artifact wheel build, thanks to Drew. We added a bunch of the ability to serialize expressions. This is for scan planning in the future, thanks to Aniket and Jamie. Fixed partition column projection with schema evolution, thanks to Kevin Zhao. Perf, iterate over generator when writing data file to reduce memory pressure, thanks to Hamilton. Another perf change, avoid copying metadata for each data file in summary, thanks to Anton. And then for Iceberg Rust, we have support for V3 metadata, thanks to Christian. There was a fix for global equality delete matching to only apply for older files, thanks to Amog. It was add support for Iceberg Data Fusion SQL logic test integration, thanks to Leon. Add table properties to spec, thanks to Kaushik. Add cluster and fanout writers, thanks to Sean. Add support reading compressed metadata, thanks to Colin. Add task writer for Data Fusion, thanks to Sean. Support both positional and equality deletes on the same file scan task, thanks to Matt. And support for positional-based column projection for Parquet file without field IDs, also thanks to Matt. Matt's doing a lot of great work on Iceberg and Spark Comet, so go check that out. Iceberg C++, add table update and requirement interface, thanks to Guotao. Write manifest arrow metadata, thanks to Dong Xiao. Add basic REST catalog request and response model, thanks to Fei Yang. Add JSON Serde for REST catalog request and response model, thanks to Fei Yan. Implement table metadata builder with assign UUID, thanks to Guotao. Add validation for assert current schema ID, thanks to Xinlin. Add satisfied order for sort field, sort order, and transform, thanks to Junwan. Implement all functions of bound predicate, thanks to Gang. And add initial documentation website, thanks to Chao Liu. So a lot of the basics being built up in Iceberg C++. And then Iceberg Go, we have table metadata v3 support, again, thanks to Dao. Implement view spec, thanks to Alessandro. Add schema evolution support, thanks to Blue. add support for timestamp nano with time zone, thanks to Blue, and support gzip metadata JSON, thanks to Hamilton. And then I also added this section for improving the website. So we deprecated Spark 3.4, or we mark Spark 3.4 as deprecated on the website. And then we also added a markdown linter for all the markdown files in the site, which is awesome to see. And we're going to burn down a lot of the rules. But at least for now, we have a consistent linter. Also added, we also changed the Jinja comment for the header HTML override. This was adding a copyright comment in HTML for every page on the site. The Jinja comment just hides that. And it's not Apache copyright. It's like some other one we copied. And then also we added virtual env and linter, make lint for the website build. That's it. And for release, there's no new release. I wanted to see if there was anything for 110.1. So I'll stop talking there. Someone else take over.
Thank you for doing highlights.
This is a 5-minute monologue, so someone else take over. I'm done. Hashim, do you want to talk about 110.1 if you're here? Otherwise, we can just keep going.
I have one thing to mention on 110.1, which is that we've been debugging some file duplication issues with Kafka Connect that we think is due to scaling up or down. So we're planning on getting a couple PRs in. If we're planning on a 1.10.1, it would be nice to get those in. I don't know what the timeline is for 110.1 though. I'll shut up. You're muted.
Okay, sorry. So for 110.1, there are three PR are still not merged yet. So I'm waiting for these 3 PRs, and after that, I think I can cut the branch for the release. Maybe 1 or 2 weeks, I guess.
Okay, I think that sounds good. Do we need help reviewing these PRs or anything? Looks like one is from Alex, one's from Edward, one's from Anurag.
Actually, I checked the Edward's PR. It looks good to me. I checked it early this morning. I think I will approve this. But for the other 2 PRs, let me check.
Yeah, this is Anurag. So for my PR, I think Amog already approved it, but I think we're waiting for Dan to take a look as well because he was reviewing before.
Yeah, I can get back to that.
Okay, thanks, Dan.
Okay, so we're actually pretty close. What about Alex's PR? Is anyone? Well, it looks like that's approved, but
that one is also waiting for Dan to take another look.
Okay, sounds good. If we're not planning on doing this release until like a week or 2, I think we've got plenty of time. But yeah, it'll be good to get those things done.
Cool. Agenda items?
Yeah, sounds good. All right. So agenda items, I'm just going to go through them top to bottom. Table metadata last updated at. Who wants to talk about that one?
So I can talk a little bit more about this one. So this is something I realized I want to ask for some clarification in the Iceberg community. So the finding is that in Iceberg, we have all the change applied to the table state in the table metadata object. And we have such field called last updated milliseconds, represent when the table state was last changed. I realized in the current Java reference implementations there, we will set this to the snapshot creation timestamp. Whenever the change, including when we add a new snapshot, and set this as a reference on the mainline branch. So I guess my question is this behavior intended? Like, do you think if there's any chance we can change this for there's some potential benefits we can probably get from decoupling those two timestamps?
So I was the one, I'm responsible for doing this in the first place. I can explain the rationale behind it. And then, yeah, let's talk about what you would want to change and why. So the last updated at timestamp currently follows the newest the timestamp of the newest snapshot if you are adding snapshots. And the rationale for that is that we don't want to have some period of time between, the snapshot and when the snapshot was committed, right? It's kind of confusing if you say that, hey, this snapshot was, committed at 9:15 a.m. And then you have a different time for the actual table change. So we're just trying to eliminate discrepancies that are confusing for people. Now, granted, we are lying about the actual commit time on the table. The justification for lying about the actual commit time on the table is that we're lying about the actual commit time on the table anyway, right? It's generated by the client. It is not coordinated across clients. What we're doing is we're making up a timestamp and saying, hey, this is when I committed it anyway. So we didn't see a big problem with trying to keep that consistent with snapshot state. One more point is that we're trying to keep it consistent with snapshot state as long as we just created and committed this snapshot. So if we are doing anything else, if we are rolling back to a prior snapshot, we do not want to change the last updated time. Dan?
I just want to clarify a couple of things because I don't remember exactly how this works. So we have the actual timestamp within the snapshot of when the snapshot was created. We also have the timestamp in the snapshot log, right?
And that we take from the commit. So sorry, from the snapshot. So you say add snapshot. What we add to the snapshot log is the snapshot ID and the snapshot timestamp from the snapshot.
Okay, so those are the same value then.
They should be. We keep the snapshot log in sync, and then when we commit the entire transaction that adds that snapshot and that makes that update to the snapshot log, we also keep table metadata timestamp in sync.
In sync with, so all three of those values are the same across all of those? Oh. Okay.
Yeah. So
doesn't that cause the problem though, Ryan, of and maybe that's what we're getting to here is if you time travel, you can time travel to a point in time of table state that was not actually committed.
So what is so first of all, I thought it was better to keep things aligned so that we don't have these weird minor gaps in timestamps where you have to say okay, this is off by a few milliseconds because it happened right after we created a timestamp and then we create, So that was the rationale behind keeping them aligned. The other justification was that if you're time traveling based on timestamp millis, sorry, first of all, that's a separate question because that is the snapshot log and the actual snapshots themselves. However, you're right that there are slight discrepancies, and what we initially said was you should not be relying on any timestamp that is generated by the client for real purposes. So that was, and I think that making sure these are slightly off and weird is fine because you shouldn't be relying on those.
So
Which is why I'm curious what the actual issue is.
So I just want to point out that so in some implementations, like for catalog implementations that rely on the physical metadata JSON and it being produced by the client, you have this weird discrepancy. For REST-based catalog implementations, they can actually correct for the actual commit time in either the snapshot list or the snapshot log or both, though they shouldn't update the timestamp which the snapshot was created, because so I think that there is meaning behind each one of these values that you can associate. They don't necessarily need to be all the same value, but in a REST catalog implementation, you can correct for the time skew that's happening from the client side metadata production.
True. So you should consider the snapshots themselves to be immutable, right? You can update the history log with whatever you want. I think the bigger thing is that the history log and the table, well, like, what are you using last updated timestamp at the table level for, right? The one that actually matters is the snapshot log. And sure, we could do that. But again, like if you're paying attention to timestamps in the snapshot log and you actually want them to be down to the millisecond accurate, I'm wondering if you're like doing the right thing. So yeah, what's the use case for caring about them, I guess, because the spec certainly doesn't say you have to keep them aligned.
Yeah, the main thing is like we can correct for this, but we shouldn't rely on it for specific behavior. So that gets back to what is the use case, and are we relying on this very specifically for correctness where we may not be able to?
Yeah, let me share a little bit more about the motivation of this change. So as Ryan and Dan said, we have two different timestamps and we are not really need to link them together. And the reason we need is today, Iceberg time travel relies on either snapshots, IDs, or timestamp. So to have an accurate and consistent behavior, we kind of need to have both.
You don't have accurate and consistent behavior if you're using timestamp.
Yeah. And so if the authoritative source happens within Iceberg, say Iceberg produces these snapshots, then everything works as expected. But if we have external table format such as Delta, that we want to write and replicate this timestamps over, because Delta rely on the version, or for the Iceberg rely on the snapshot IDs, but they all can be done in a way that time travel based on the timestamp. So sometimes if we can write this snapshot as backdated, like so just to replicate this snapshot from the Delta to the Iceberg, we might need to write as if the snapshot was created in the past. So this itself doesn't really cause a problem. It's only be a problem because we have this chronological ordering of both snapshot logs as well as this table metadata history logs. Those two are independently make sure that they need to order it in terms of time with tolerance of a 1 minute clock skew. But I think the fact that we link those snapshot creation timestamp and table metadata time last update timestamp together, these will be problems, because some other like update table properties will also update one but not another timestamp. So maintain ordering of those two timestamp sometimes will give a little bit trouble.
So updating table properties won't affect the snapshot log or the snapshots themselves. Yeah. And there's no equivalent of the snapshot log in Delta.
Right.
So I don't know why the values in the snapshot log would affect translation to or from Delta.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we want them. I would actually say in that case, if you're translating to and from Delta, Delta gives you a linear commit history on version ID and guarantees that the timestamp of each commit will differ by at least a millisecond. So you have a unique timestamp in milliseconds for each commit. Those, if you're translating to Iceberg, should be the timestamp, if you're translating to Iceberg, should just be the timestamp in millis. And in that case, you actually want the snapshot log to exactly match the timestamps that you're using in the snapshots themselves, because then your time travel would exactly match the behavior that you get in Delta. So isn't this an argument for making the snapshot log match the snapshots?
Maybe I can clarify a little bit. Yes, I think we want to carry over the times. Then when we do any metadata translation, right? The snapshot timestamp we want to carry over from the source metadata. For example, in the data lake case would be the data lake version ID or sometimes that, so the time travel will be consistent. I think we all agree with that. So the scenario is that if the source table have a non-snapshot change, let's say update schema, and we carry over that one to the Iceberg, the metadata timestamp will be system clock, right? And will be the system clock at the translation.
Yes, but what are you using the metadata timestamp for? Because I thought we were saying that the timestamps that we care about are snapshot and snapshot log timestamp.
Well, yeah, let me finish. We don't really care about that one. Now, let's say the next change we want to translate is there's a data change. There's a snapshot we need to add. But now we translate the snapshot. Now we carry over the timestamp from the source table. Now the previous commit have a metadata timestamp that is newer than the carried over snapshot timestamp. Whereas normally the new commit will have a metadata timestamp that's older because it carry over the snapshot timestamp.
Okay, but okay, so in this case, we carry over one commit, a new snapshot, change the schema of the table, and the table's last updated snapshot timestamp changes. Then we carry over another commit, and
with snapshot.
In that case, we carry over the original commit's timestamp and update the log with that timestamp. So
Sure.
At least keeping that in line is what we think is correct behavior.
Agreed.
Okay. And then you're saying that because we take the last updated timestamp from the actual commit, we are rolling it backwards, essentially.
Yeah, so exactly. So the table metadata timestamp roll back in this case. Snapshot is correct, is what we want.
So I see the issue. It seems like it probably wouldn't affect anything, but if you are relying on that timestamp always rolling forward, then that would be weird. So
we don't rely on we don't rely on the timestamp. I think the problem is the validation on the clock shift.
Okay, I mean, it would make sense to me to say that if you're rolling that backwards, just take the current timestamp, right? Like if you're in a situation where you have carried over the snapshots timestamp to the current table metadata, and hey, that doesn't look right because it's going backward in time, I think it would be perfectly fine for the table metadata to refresh that to current time.
Yeah, that's what Hongye was trying to ask. Should we always decouple the table metadata timestamp with the snapshot timestamp? Should the table metadata timestamp always be just the system clock when the action happens?
I don't think I have an objection to doing that. I think the main thing is validating that it is a good idea to, at least in table history, snapshot history log, do that, keep them in sync. I do worry a little bit about this, like the question of if my table was updated at t plus 5 milliseconds and my snapshot log was updated at t, like what's going on? Why is there a discrepancy? I think we want to avoid confusing situations. So I would probably say the logic that makes the most sense is keep the current logic, but if you're rolling the current metadata timestamp backwards, then refresh it.
So if you talk about the Rust catalog, right, there is actually a discrepancy between the snapshot timestamp generation and the metadata timestamp generation. The metadata is generated on the catalog server side.
Yeah.
From that perspective, it also seems natural to decouple them.
I don't have a strong opinion either way. I would just, for normal cases where you're, all of these things presumably have the same effective time, I would probably align them.
Yep. For example, for the metadata translation, right, we all agree that the snapshot timestamp should carry over from the source, so the time travel will be consistent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we all agree on. And if we did this kind of async translation, the metadata timestamp is late. Could be seconds, could be a minute late. Actually, that information might be useful also.
Again, I don't think that the table time, like last updated timestamp of the table metadata itself, should matter to anyone, right? And I agree that we don't want it to go backwards, but like I think if you were trying to debug things, right, then having alignment there is going to make the most sense for debugging purposes, and that's the primary use of this. On the other hand, like the REST catalog, we've made the decision there, and I think that this was a conscious decision to, have the timestamp generated by the service, right? Because there is a larger gap, you might have a difference in apparent timestamps between the client and the service, right? So it makes sense to do that. So I would, say like if you're using the REST catalog, you already have sort of what you want. If you're using a client, again, I would advocate for the don't roll it backwards, but I don't think, I honestly I'm more concerned about people trying to use this for some purpose.
Yeah.
Sorry, Wing Yu has been waiting patiently.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to ask about the time travel aspect. If there's a schema change and it's recorded in the metadata, but the metadata timestamp is out of sync with the snapshot timestamps, then if you're traveling to a snapshot after the schema change, is there an issue with picking up the correct schema? I haven't looked at this in ages, but I'm guessing that in the snapshot, we are recording the schema ID. So it should be okay, but
there is a chance here. And again, this kind of comes back to our philosophy of if you're time traveling by timestamp, you're being imprecise and you get what you get. So like what can happen is at time t, we add a commit and that says my schema is version 1. At time t2, you update the schema of a table. And at time t3, you add another commit and say my schema was ID 2. Now, t2 is essentially not in snapshot history, right? If you're precisely time traveling by version number, or snapshot ID, then you get the snapshot's current schema, and so you get that correctly. But if you time travel to T2 exactly, should we use, we don't know that a reader at that thought it was T2 would have gotten the new schema or the old schema. And so we think that it is perfectly reasonable to give you whatever schema is easiest. Now, that is not to say that you can't also create a commit that records that schema change. That's our solution to this problem, is if it is important to you that that there is some recorded schema change, then you should add an empty commit that records the schema change.
Right. That is certainly an issue, but I think it's different from the issue that I'm worried about in this case, where you have these snapshots that are being created asynchronously. So they're using the old timestamps, and then you're creating the schema change metadata with the actual synchronous system time change, system time, and those two will be out of sync, right? Because the snapshots have older timestamps, and then the schema change has a newer timestamp. So the schema change will appear to have been after the snapshot rather than before.
So the schema change is not in the snapshot timeline at all.
Right.
Right. And if you want to put it in the snapshot timeline, you need to create a snapshot. And at that point, that's when you specify the timestamp of that snapshot. So if you're mirroring changes from a source table, you would not use the current time at sync. What you would use is presumably the time when you change the actual schema to record and embed that schema change in the snapshot log.
Right, I understand that. But let's say that didn't happen in the source. So in the target, you're not going to have that commit to do that, and yet you want to have the same behavior in the target as in the source.
Well, in that case, like I think that it's pretty much I mean, it is up to you the semantics of your mirroring, right? You have all of the tools to mirror exactly as you had it in the source. If you've lost information, then we can't really help you.
Okay.
And either way, I think the actual the timestamp of the actual table metadata is not used in time travel at all.
Okay.
So I guess we're advocating for different positions here. I really don't think that it is significant if we, always refresh the table metadata timestamp and do it that way. I have a slight preference to the other, but whatever you guys want to do, I want to just avoid making guarantees about any timestamps.
Agree. Yeah, I think the purpose is not to use the table metadata timestamp for any correctness or time travel, just informational purpose. I think that's it's valuable to kind of keep them separate, because then the table metadata always reflect the kind of commit timestamp where that metadata file is generated.
Kinda.
Because it also can reflect the delay, what's the delay between snapshot timestamp and actual commit. That information has, to me, even for troubleshooting, we don't need that timestamp to link which snapshot that the metadata is pointing to, because that's in the metadata JSON file. We don't need the timestamp to correlate them.
I think that's fair. I think it just opens questions for like, hey, it says that this timestamp was used and this commit was made effective at that timestamp, but then the metadata generation happened later and commit probably happened later than that. It just opens questions that I don't want to answer. So it's totally fine to do it that way. I doubt we're gonna ever have a problem either way. So yeah, go for it. Unless there are other objections, I shouldn't say that I can unilaterally do it. All right, should we move on to namespace separator, Edward?
Yep, I brought that up. So just a quick summary of what the issue is. So right now in the REST protocol, when we deal with nested namespaces, we have a hard-coded separator, which hasn't caused any issues up until a certain version. The thing is, the hard-coded separator is a control character, and newer servlet spec versions throw errors when that is used. And so what I'm proposing is to make that separator configurable by the server, because the server is the only entity that knows what character is safe to use. And I just wanted to raise awareness that we, had this discussion a while ago. We just never concluded it. So I, just wanted to raise awareness that there's still the discussion going on about this topic, and that we would like conclude on this and essentially, provide users that upgrade their server stack an option to go forward and not run into this issue in their production environment.
Yeah,
I think we'll go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's similar reason because at most organization they have a kind of well-accepted separator for namespace. Right? They may use different one, but typically as a practice they use one. And we have this problem for server upgrade, so somehow we need to move forward.
Yep.
To me, I think this is like a reasonable way to move forward. We cannot stuck forever.
Yeah, exactly. Like users of the current API, there's no other way forward. Like either you're stuck or you wait until we provide a V2 API that does proper escaping and everything. But even then, users of the V1 API are stuck with that issue if we don't provide them a viable, solution.
Yeah, and I'm very skeptical about proper escaping, right? Like escaping anytime you add it adds a lot of complexity. Like you get double escaping and escaping problems. Like my preferred solution is still just to mandate that it be a dot. But I think that it's a good solution to say that it is configurable. So I'd encourage everyone to take a look at the design doc that was sent to the list again. We can discuss it, I think, next week in the REST catalog sync as well, because I don't want to just bring it up here. But really, please take a look and comment. So we'd love to move past this problem.
Thanks.
All right. Talit, do you want to talk to us about V3 adoption PR?
Yeah, that PR is created after the October 1st Iceberg meetup. That there was multiple people, they were not aware of that. But what I discussed, I just want to get attention for that. There is a PR. I want to keep updating whatever the V3 feature is, to merge and to make a consistent view for community to do that. Of course, I am not committed or the PMC. That's why I need your help, Daniel.
Yeah, I remember looking at the original version of it, and I think there was a little disconnect because we already have like a status page that shows like all the different projects and like where they are in implementing like V1, V2. And so the question, did we consolidate with that so that we actually have kind of a...
I just addressed your comments. I moved to the table to our status page, and it just needs to look maybe final look. Then once we merge it, I will keep updating the PR.
Yeah, I just didn't want there to be like two different places that we're going, one for everything and then one for just V3. So.
And for second one, it's also getting attention. I know Steven told me next week he will look at that, but though I start giving the V3 spec support for the Flink, please help me for review and to give your comments. The variant one is, I believe, except Iva, there is no much the understanding. I asked Iva for that if he is in the meeting.
Yes. I just checked. Sorry, I missed your message. Yeah, I just checked your PR. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it'd be great to get variant support over there. I didn't realize that it had been added to Flink.
Yeah, sorry, I also missed that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, thanks a lot. For adding that.
And I'm not clear about the one thing. Maybe this may not be the right form. You can tell me if it is not. In SQL, how we can specify the sum of the subtypes on the variant? Is there any way for that? I couldn't find it. Whatever the JSON supported, we can support it. But if I want to say decimal, there is no way to say the decimal. Or if I want to say binary, there is no way to say the binary in the JSON.
Sorry, are you talking about converting JSON to variant or variant to JSON?
No, what I'm saying that in SQL, the defining a variant column is the one thing, but also you need to input your data.
Mhm.
And the inputting data is just you define your data as a JSON format, right? The string version of the
Oh, you mean
JSON.
like just like use part? Well, well, I guess it depends on the engine, right? For example, if you support parse JSON,
Spark
like
support that. That's why I'm saying that, and also Flink support that. But is there any way to define without JSON the variant column itself, like the values column value itself in SQL? I'm not saying that Java or Python SDKs.
yeah, well, one is you probably like can specify explicit type, right? For example, you can specify explicit type to say, oh, this is if it supports, like you say, oh, this is kind of like decimal 4 or something. But if let's say if you only like support parse JSON, those kind of things, like it will try to use the matched type to hold that value.
Then it is always, I see. If it is quote, it's basically string directly.
Yeah.
I see one issue. I just want to get the suggestion from the the audience. The like variant feature, it's not clear how I'm going to use with Iceberg. We claim that we have variant support, and I'm going to write a document for that. But where should I put that document? What is the right place? Should I put under the getting starter for V3 table support examples?
Yeah, I think I saw like some people are writing externally, in the medium.com or some other forums as well. But in Iceberg itself, I'm not sure.
Yeah, there should be source. That's why I'm saying. Go ahead.
I think it would be great to have like a tutorial on using variant, and also call out in some of the documentation how to use it. In Iceberg, it really seems to come down to like how to use it from an engine. So you could have a document on like, hey, here's Iceberg's API for working with variant data. But I would expect like Flink and Spark to take the heavy lifting on the actual like user-facing documentation, because that's primarily how users interact with the types. Now we might want to have like we have an example in Spark and an example in Flink for basic things, and we might want to have some of those, but that to me seems more like a getting started or tutorial, rather than necessarily carrying all the documentation on our end.
Okay, then I will update the Flink related documentation for variant specific, just simple examples.
That's probably a great idea.
Okay.
I also, on your previous question, I'm curious, does anyone know if there are implementations of like JSON parse that look for patterns in the JSON and can say like, okay, hey, this string value looks like a timestamp and I'm going to parse it into a timestamp? Or, similarly with a decimal value, something like that. I know you can.
JSON, are you talking like string fields within JSON or like the JSON native representation?
So there's parse JSON takes a JSON string and produces a variant, and I think that's the primary way we're getting variant data into these columns. You could then say like, okay, hey, modify my variant and cast this event TS field to a timestamp, right? I don't know if there is defined syntax for that, but you could also say like, hey, when you're looking and converting JSON, run a regex and see, does something look like a timestamp, and parse it as a timestamp.
You pointed a really good point. This was my issue also too. I was not able to define a timestamp with variant currently. It's always string.
I mean, I know that you can do things like, take a struct and cast it to variant, or presumably you can. So that's one way of getting that information. But I don't really know how most people work with this. Kevin?
I remember reading what you just described related to DuckDB. Trying to find the article right now, but I do remember DuckDB had a few blogs about parsing JSON and kind of doing some heuristics around like the parsing.
That would make the most sense to me, is just like have a mode or a separate parser that looks for these patterns, because they're not particularly difficult patterns, especially if you're saying like, well, actually most engines have a way of casting strings to timestamp, so it would just be a matter of looking for what is a supported string there.
So it looks like, I mean, Trino has some like JSON support with native ways of like casting it to certain value types. It would be good to look at just like what they're doing, because it's a combination of like JSON path plus some like casting semantics, it looks like.
Yeah.
So it would be like path dot timestamp, and you extract it as a timestamp.
The Spark also support that for based on the path, but there is no any insert.
Well, so are we talking about creating records, or are we talking about extracting?
Creating records, at least what I understood from Brian.
I mean, yeah, I think there is a good question of like, okay, so I have JSON data coming in. How do I, convert that into a variant? That's a good question, I think, for like Kafka Connect and some of these frameworks. So I would expect Flink to have a story around that.
I thought Spark already had a conversion from like JSON text to variant, and then it would use whatever is closest to the native type for what the JSON representation is. So if it's a JSON so JSON doesn't have a timestamp, right? But it does have like integer values, decimal values, things like that. And the
problem is that you would get, if you embedded a timestamp as a string, you would see that as a string and pass it as a string.
Yeah. So, and I think that's the question of like, well, if you're taking JSON data, you don't have a way to like create a timestamp based on the JSON data. However, you can extract it as a timestamp if it is a formatted, timestamp thing, if you use something like what Trino has for taking a JSON path and then effectively casting the resulting value as something. So,
but that's fine. Yeah. But then how do you stick that back in a variant, right? Or if you wanted to shred and filter by a timestamp column in a variant.
Well, I think the issue is that we're talking about JSON, but variant is a superset of JSON, right?
Yeah.
Because it has these other types that JSON does not support natively, and it has, multiple types that are subdivisions of numeric types that JSON doesn't really make differentiated, storage for. So, how do we interact natively with variant, I guess? Because like right now, the only mechanism through JSON.
Yeah, exactly. So the problem is like there are a whole bunch of things producing JSON, right? And we know that they have richer data than can be represented there. So, how do we convert it to a richer representation in variant without necessarily pushing that problem all the way out to data producers, right? You could always say, hey, if you're producing events, you should produce them as variant and send them through Kafka. And for some things like, open telemetry, it's probably going to be doable in the short term to start pushing those things as native variant. But for a lot of existing code, like we can and probably should do a better job of converting from JSON. It looks like an interesting thing is in the DuckDB docs that Kevin linked, you can actually specify the types of fields. And so maybe something like that is the appropriate solution to say, like, hey, here's a set of fields that, if they're present, have a certain type. Similarly, there's this like auto detect thing. Maybe that would apply. I don't know the state of the art here, but it does make sense to me that JSON parsers would be responsible for this. Or maybe we call it a variant parser and just extend.
I also share that, the Spark support on the link, it's able to detect some of them.
Thank you.
Like daytime, it doesn't detect it. Or I don't see any example for binary orders.
Yeah.
Cool. We have 4 minutes. I want to make sure Peter gets. Are you still here?
My 5 minutes highlight.
Yes.
5 minutes of my life. So basically, thanks Ryan for the comments on the PR or on Slack. Basically, I implemented the solution you suggested, turned back the wheel and write builder and read builder are parameterized again, and then instead of mucking with the old Parquet write builder and read builder implementations and whatnot, I created a different implementation of the new APIs, which are using the old ones. And basically, the proof of concept PR is also there. I'm still fighting with some of the test cases, but these are just superficial stuff. I tried this solution previously already, so it was not a big deal to replay all those stuff. So if you have time, please feel free to review. I will send you the link on the Slack as well, and I will send an email later.
Awesome. Well, thank you for working on all that.
That's from my side.
Okay, and I think that is all of our topics and right at time. Thank you guys for coming this week. Good to see everyone. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.